She was starving, freezing, and standing inches from safety, but she would not take one step inside. The last light of evening had faded behind the Blue Ridge foothills when the animal control van pulled into the gravel lot of Willow Creek Shelter outside Asheville, North Carolina. Cold wind moved through the open doorway, carrying the smell of wet leaves, clean concrete, and warm food from the kennels beyond. Staff Sergeant Mason Reed stood beneath the yellow porch light as the rear doors opened. He was 40, broad-shouldered, fair-skinned, with short brown hair and gray-blue eyes that had learned to notice what fear tried to hide. Inside the van, a German shepherd crouched against the wall. Her black and tan coat was streaked with mud. Her ribs showed beneath the fur. One paw trembled each time she shifted her weight. Carla Jensen, the shelter manager, clipped a lead to the faded collar and spoke softly. "Come on, girl. It is warm inside." The dog stepped down from the van, looked toward the open shelter door, and stopped. Through the entrance, blankets waited beneath heat lamps. Stainless steel bowls held water. Somewhere farther in, another dog barked once, then settled. The shepherd could smell food. Mason saw her nose move toward it. Hunger pulled her forward for half a step. Then she looked past the building toward the dark tree line behind the parking lot and backed away. Carla loosened the lead. "Easy. No one is forcing you." The dog lowered her body until her chest nearly touched the gravel. She was not growling. She was not showing her teeth. She simply refused to cross the narrow strip of concrete beneath the doorway. A shelter worker brought a bowl of food and placed it a few feet inside. The smell of chicken and rice drifted into the cold. The shepherd stared at it, swallowed, and turned her head toward the woods again. Mason watched the direction of her gaze. Not random, not frightened scanning. She kept returning to the same opening between two pine trees. "Where was she found?" he asked. Carla kept her voice low. "Near the old gas station off Route 74. Animal control saw her moving along the shoulder. No tags. No chip." "How far from here?" "About 2 miles through the service road." The shepherd tried to stand, but her legs weakened. Mason moved closer and crouched several feet away. He did not touch the lead. He removed one glove and placed his bare hand against the cold ground, palm open. The dog looked at him. Her amber eyes were tired, but not empty. She took one slow step, then another, and stopped just beyond his reach. Mason noticed the burrs caught beneath her belly, the thin streaks of dried mud along her legs, and the way the fur around her underside had been worn short. He had seen enough working dogs and enough exhausted animals to recognize what the others had missed. His expression changed. "She has been nursing." Carla looked down. "Are you sure?" Mason nodded. "Recently." The shepherd heard something beyond the shelter. Her ears lifted. She turned so quickly the lead tightened, then made a low, urgent sound toward the trees. Not a bark. A call. Mason looked at Carla. "She is not afraid of going inside." The German shepherd took 3 determined steps toward the woods, stumbled, and caught herself. Then she looked back at Mason, waiting. He rose slowly. "She is trying to get back to someone." The wind moved through the pines, and from somewhere beyond the dark service road came a sound so faint it could have been leaves shifting. The shepherd heard it. Her entire body went still. Then she pulled toward the tree line with the last strength she had. Several hours earlier, Mason Reed had arrived at Willow Creek Shelter expecting to stay only until sunset. He volunteered twice a week, mostly repairing kennel doors, unloading food, and walking the older dogs that preferred silence to excitement. The work suited him because it required patience without questions. After 20 years in the Marine Corps, Mason had learned how to carry responsibility. What he had not learned was how to explain the empty spaces it left behind. He lived alone in a small house outside Asheville, where the porch light came on automatically and no one noticed when he returned late. His younger sister, Grace, lived less than an hour away, but they had not spoken in 11 months. No argument had ended them, just missed calls, delayed replies, and the kind of silence that grows heavier each time someone decides to wait one more day. That afternoon, Mason was tightening a loose hinge near the intake room when Carla called his name from the office. "Animal control is bringing in a stray," she said. "Adult female. Found near the old gas station on Route 74. Mason glanced at the clock. "I was about to leave." Carla gave him a tired smile. "You say that every time." Outside, the temperature had dropped into the low 30s, and a thin wind moved dry leaves across the gravel. The shelter sat at the edge of town, bordered by pine trees, a narrow service road, and several acres of undeveloped land. Most animals arrived frightened by the noise and unfamiliar smells. Mason knew the routine. Keep movement slow. Avoid direct pressure. Let the dog decide the first safe step. When the van pulled in, he expected another case of hunger and neglect. Then the doors opened, and he saw the German Shepherd pressed against the far wall. Even before she stepped down, Mason noticed details that did not match a simple stray. Mud coated only the lower half of her legs, as if she had crossed wet ground repeatedly. A pale strand of dried grass clung beneath her belly. Her collar was worn, but not broken. She had belonged somewhere. Carla checked the intake report. No identification. No microchip. She was walking the shoulder near the abandoned gas station and kept trying to turn back toward the woods. Mason watched the dog skin the lot. She ignored the office, the van, and the food cart. Her attention stayed fixed on the tree line behind the shelter. How long was animal control with her? About an hour. Did she eat? Would not touch anything. The shepherd stepped onto the gravel, then lowered her nose and searched the air. Mason saw the dried milk along her underside before anyone else did. He felt the old instinct return, the one that had once made him read a landscape for what was missing rather than what was visible. She has puppies, he said. Carla looked again. Maybe she had them weeks ago. Mason shook his head. Not weeks. The dog moved toward the woods until the lead stopped her. She turned back, not at Carla, but at Mason. For one brief second, their eyes met. Then she took 2 steps toward the trees and looked back again. An invitation. A request. Mason thought of Grace standing on his porch the last time they spoke, saying, "You always leave before anyone can ask you to stay." He had no answer then. Now the shepherd waited beneath the fading light, asking without words. Mason reached for a flashlight, a radio, and 2 folded blankets from the emergency shelf. "Where are you going?" Carla asked. He clipped the radio to his jacket. "She is not trying to leave us." The dog pulled once toward the trees. Mason opened the gate. "She is trying to lead us back." Mason did not take the lead from Carla. He unclipped it. For a moment, the German shepherd stood between the shelter door and the open gate, free to choose either direction. The warmth behind her carried the scent of food, blankets, and safety. The woods ahead were dark, cold, and uncertain. She turned toward Mason first. He lowered himself to one knee and placed the back of his bare hand near the gravel. "I am listening," he said. The dog approached slowly. Her nose touched his wrist, light as breath. Then she turned and walked through the gate. After 6 steps, she stopped and looked back. Mason followed. Carla came to the doorway, arms folded against the cold. "You cannot go alone. I have the radio." "That is not what I meant." Mason glanced toward the trees. The shepherd waited beneath the first line of pines, body trembling with exhaustion. "Call Emily and tell her we may have newborns." Carla's expression changed. She nodded and reached for her phone. Mason took the flashlight, 2 blankets, a bottle of water, and a small emergency kit. He moved toward the dog without rushing. She continued only when he was close enough to see. The trail behind the shelter was barely a trail at all. Wet leaves covered the ground, and low branches brushed against Mason's jacket. The temperature had fallen below freezing, turning each breath pale in the beam of his flashlight. The shepherd moved with purpose, but not speed. Every 20 or 30 yards, she paused to listen, then looked back to confirm Mason was still there. He did not call her. He did not try to guide her. He simply stayed. They crossed a shallow drainage ditch where muddy water reflected the last gray light. On the far bank, Mason noticed small impressions in the soft earth. Too narrow for the adult dog. Too scattered to belong to one animal. He crouched and aimed the flashlight closer. Tiny paw prints. Some fresh. Some blurred by rain. "Good girl," he murmured. The shepherd's ears lifted, but she kept moving. Farther along, a strip of faded blue fabric hung from a wire fence. It looked like part of a child's blanket, torn and damp. Mason removed it carefully and smelled old dust, wet leaves, and dog fur. The shepherd touched it with her nose, then continued toward an abandoned service road. Her legs weakened twice. The second time, Mason stepped beside her and slid one hand beneath her chest. She accepted the support for only a few seconds before standing on her own again. You do not have to prove anything, he said. She looked at him, then toward the road ahead. The message was clear. Not yet. Near the edge of the service road, they found an empty plastic bowl turned upside down beside a tree. A length of frayed rope lay nearby, half buried in mud. Mason's radio crackled. Carla's voice came through. Emily is on her way. Animal control is returning with a transport crate and heat packs. Where are you? Mason looked beyond the road. An old pickup sat near a concrete drainage culvert, its tires flat, its body dulled by years of weather. About 3/4 of a mile south of the shelter, he said. There is an abandoned truck near the culvert. The shepherd heard the word truck and pulled forward with sudden urgency. She crossed the road, stumbled near the shoulder, and disappeared beneath the pickup. Mason reached the truck and dropped to the ground. The space underneath was dark, sheltered by leaves, scraps of cloth, and cardboard pushed against the axle. Luna, though Mason did not know her name yet, lay at the entrance to the makeshift nest and gave a low warning sound. Not at him. At the distance between him and what she guarded. Mason set the flashlight on the ground and let the beam travel beneath the frame. At first, he saw only shadows. Then one small shape moved. Another pressed weakly against it. A thin cry came from deeper inside. Mason counted once. Then again. 5 puppies. 3 stirred. 2 did not. The mother looked from them to Mason, and for the second time that evening, she asked him to understand without words. Mason stayed low beside the truck and let the mother watch every movement. The cold ground pressed through his jeans, and the metal frame above him held the night air like ice. He did not reach for the puppies. Not yet. He placed one hand flat on the dirt and spoke quietly. I will not take them from you. The German shepherd kept her body curved around the nest. Her breathing was fast, but the warning sound faded. Mason picked up the strip of blue cloth from his pocket and slid it toward her. She sniffed it, then looked at the puppies. A moment later, she moved just enough to give him room. Mason reached for the radio. Carla, I found 5. 3 are moving. 2 need help now. Static cracked through the speaker before Emily Hart answered. Keep them warm before anything else. Do not feed them. Use your body heat if you have to. Mason unfolded one blanket and pushed it beneath the edge of the truck. He moved slowly, giving the mother time to inspect each touch. The first puppy was cold but responsive, making a faint sound when he lifted it. Mason held it near the mother's nose before wrapping it. She breathed over the tiny body, then allowed him to place it inside his jacket. The second puppy stirred weakly. The third pressed against Mason's palm with a movement so small he almost missed it. He repeated the same ritual each time. Lift. Let the mother smell. Wrap. Hold close. The 2 remaining puppies lay deeper beneath the axle. One gave a shallow breath. The other did not move. Mason's hands stayed steady, though something inside him tightened. Emily's voice came through the radio. You are doing fine. Check the chest. Gentle pressure only. Mason reached farther under the truck and brought the 4th puppy into the light. It was smaller than the others, its fur damp from the cold earth. He placed it against his chest beneath the olive-field jacket and rubbed slowly along its back. Nothing happened. The mother crawled forward and touched her nose to the puppy's face. Mason continued. The forest around them grew quiet. Even the wind seemed to stop between the trees. Then the puppy opened its mouth and released a breath no louder than a whisper. Mason looked down. One tiny paw curled against his shirt. I have movement, he said into the radio. Emily answered at once. Good. Keep it warm. The 5th puppy remained under the truck. Mason could just reach it with his fingertips. A piece of torn cardboard had folded over the nest, blocking the safest angle. He shifted carefully, moving the cardboard 1 inch at a time. The mother stayed beside him, eyes fixed on his hand. Mason finally freed the puppy and drew it toward the opening. This one gave a weak cry before he even lifted it. The mother's ears rose. Her entire body softened for the first time. Headlights appeared through the trees as the animal control vehicle reached the service road. Carla arrived with Emily and a shelter worker carrying heat packs, towels, and a padded crate. Emily knelt beside Mason and checked each puppy beneath the beam of a work light. They are cold, but they are here, she said. The mother watched as the puppies were placed together inside a warmed carrier. When the last one disappeared beneath a clean towel, she stood and moved after it. Her legs shook, but she did not look back at the truck. Mason walked beside her toward the shelter vehicle. The long trail through the woods was no longer a search. It was a return. Yet when they reached Willow Creek and the warm doorway opened before them, the German shepherd stopped at the threshold again. Mason looked down at her, then at the carrier in Carla's hands. "She will not go in first," he said. Carla understood. One by one, they carried the puppies across the doorway. The mother watched each small body disappear into the light. Only after the fifth was safely inside did she lift one tired paw and step over the threshold. The shelter's treatment room glowed with warm yellow light, and the sudden contrast from the forest made every surface look softer than it was. Emily placed the 5 puppies beneath a heat lamp, while Carla prepared clean towels and measured small amounts of warm fluid. The mother stood beside the table, unwilling to lie down until she had touched each puppy with her nose. Mason watched her count them in silence. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Only then did she lower herself onto the padded floor. Emily examined the smallest puppy first, the one Mason had held beneath his jacket. Its breathing remained shallow, but steady. "The next few hours matter," she said. "If they keep warm and begin nursing, they have a good chance." Mason nodded. He had heard variations of that sentence before, in places far from North Carolina, where hope was always measured in hours. Carla brought the mother a bowl of water and a small portion of food. She drank first, then looked toward the puppies. Emily moved the bowl closer to the blankets. The German shepherd ate slowly without taking her eyes off them. "She needs a name," Carla said. Mason sat against the wall, his olive jacket still holding the faint warmth of the puppy he had carried. "Luna," he said. Carla looked at him. "Why Luna?" Mason glanced through the narrow window at the moon rising above the pines. She kept moving through the dark. Luna lifted her head at the sound, as if testing whether the word belonged to her. Emily smiled. "Luna it is." Near midnight, the puppies began to settle against their mother. For nursed weekly, the smallest remained apart, too tired to find its way. Mason washed his hands, then guided it gently toward Luna. She watched closely but allowed him to help. The puppy found warmth, then began to move with slow determination. Mason let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Emily looked across the table. "You can go home. We have staff through the night." Mason checked the time. His house was 20 minutes away. Grace lived less than an hour beyond that. His phone sat in his pocket with her number still saved, though untouched for nearly a year. "I will stay a little longer," he said. Carla handed him coffee from the staff room. "You always say that too." The shelter quieted after midnight. The kennels settled. Rain began tapping lightly against the roof. Mason sat on the floor beside Luna while she rested with her head near the puppies. Every so often, one of them made a small sound, and her ears moved toward it. Mason thought about the moment at the doorway. Luna had not refused safety. She had refused to accept it without those she loved. The difference seemed simple now. He wondered how many times he had mistaken distance for rejection, silence for indifference, fear for choice. His phone vibrated once with a routine message from the shelter system. He took it out anyway. Grace's name remained near the top of his contacts. He opened the thread. 11 months of nothing. Before that, one final message from her. "I am tired of waiting outside your life." Mason stared at the words until they blurred. On the floor, Luna shifted closer to the puppies. The smallest one pressed beneath her chin. Mason typed 3 words. "Are you awake?" He did not send them. Not yet. A knock sounded at the treatment room door. Deputy Noah Briggs stepped inside, carrying a file folder and a plastic evidence bag containing the frayed rope found near the truck. "We identified the vehicle," he said. "It belongs to a family who left town 6 weeks ago." Mason looked up. "Did they abandon her?" Noah shook his head. "Not the way it looks." Luna raised her head at the unfamiliar voice. Mason rested one hand near her shoulder. Noah opened the folder. They lost their apartment in a fire, moved between temporary housing, and Luna disappeared during the transfer. They searched for 3 days before the father had to leave for work in Tennessee. Mason looked at the 5 puppies. "Do they know about them?" "Not yet." Noah held up his phone. "But they are about to." Noah placed the phone on speaker and called the number listed in the vehicle records. It rang twice before a man answered, his voice guarded and tired. Noah identified himself, then asked about the German shepherd registered to the family. Silence followed. In the treatment room, Luna lifted her head as though the word itself had crossed the distance. "Is she alive?" the man asked. The question carried 6 weeks of fear. Mason looked at Luna, then at the 5 puppies gathered against her. She is alive, Noah said. And she was not alone. The man inhaled sharply. A woman spoke somewhere beside him, asking what that meant. Noah explained the shelter, the abandoned truck, and the litter found beneath it. When he said 5 puppies, the line went quiet again. Mason could hear the soft static of the connection and the faint sound of someone crying without trying to hide it. We did not know, the man said. She disappeared the night we moved. We searched every road near the apartment. The fire took most of what we had. Then my job transferred us, and we had nowhere stable to bring her even if we found her. His voice broke, then steadied. Please do not think we left her. Mason looked at the frayed rope in the evidence bag. It was not tied around Luna when she was found. It had likely been part of the temporary shelter beneath the truck, something dragged there with the bowl and the blanket. No one here thinks that, Mason said. The man asked to see her. Noah switched the call to video and turned the screen toward Luna. At first, she did not react. Then the woman on the call said her name. Luna. The German shepherd's ears rose. Her head came up. The man leaned closer to the camera, his eyes red. Hey, girl. Luna stood too quickly and swayed. Mason steadied her with one hand. She stared at the screen, nose working, confused by the familiar voices without scent. One of the puppies shifted beneath her, and she looked down at once. The man saw them. His face changed from grief to wonder. She had babies. 5, Emily said. They are weak, but improving. The woman covered her mouth. A young boy appeared between them, blinking at the screen. Is that Luna? He asked. The dog heard the child's voice and gave a soft sound deep in her throat. The boy smiled through tears. She remembers me. Mason looked away for a moment. Some bonds survived distance without understanding it. Others waited for someone to choose them again. Noah asked whether the family could reclaim Luna after she recovered. The man closed his eyes before answering. We are living in one room behind my brother's shop. Animals are not allowed. I cannot bring her back into that. Shame entered his voice, but Mason heard something else beneath it. Love with nowhere safe to go. Then we will keep her safe, Mason said. The man looked toward the screen. You promise? Mason watched Luna settle around the puppies. Each small body pressed into the warmth she had fought to reach. I promise she will not disappear again. The family thanked them quietly. Before the call ended, the boy touched 2 fingers to the camera. Luna stepped closer and pressed her nose against the glass. Then the screen went dark. The room became still. Noah closed the folder. They are signing a voluntary surrender so the shelter can place all 6 together until the puppies are ready. Mason nodded. Luna returned to the blankets. The smallest puppy had begun nursing on its own. Emily smiled. That is a good sign. Mason took out his phone again. Grace's message remained open. I am tired of waiting outside your life. He thought about the family who loved Luna but could not take her home, about the dog who had walked through cold woods rather than accept safety alone, and about promises that meant nothing unless someone crossed the distance. He typed again. I should have called sooner. This time, he pressed send. Grace replied 12 minutes later. Mason saw her name appear on the screen while Luna slept beside the puppies beneath the heat lamp. For a moment, he could not open the message. He had faced storms, losses, and decisions that left no room for hesitation. Yet 4 words from his sister made his hands feel uncertain. You still can call. Mason stepped into the quiet hallway and pressed the phone icon before fear could turn into another delay. Grace answered on the first ring. Neither of them spoke at once. The shelter hummed around him with the soft sound of ventilation and distant paws shifting in kennels. I should have called sooner, Mason said. You already wrote that. Her voice was cautious, but not cold. Writing it was easier. I know. He leaned against the wall and looked through the treatment room window. Luna had lifted her head. Even from across the room, she watched the puppies before allowing herself to rest again. I met a dog tonight, Mason said. Grace gave a small laugh. That sounds like you. She would not come inside without her puppies. The line went quiet. Mason continued before he could retreat. I think I have been doing the same thing in reverse. Standing outside because I thought staying away was safer. Grace took a slow breath. Safer for who? Mason looked down. Probably no one. On the other end, he heard a chair move across a kitchen floor. You always leave before anyone can ask you to stay, she said. I know. And then you act like the silence happened by itself. Mason closed his eyes. The words hurt because they were true, but truth no longer felt like an attack. It felt like a door. I am sorry, Grace. She did not answer immediately. When she did, her voice softened. I am still angry. You should be. That is not the same as wanting you gone. Mason opened his eyes. Through the glass, the smallest puppy pushed against Luna's chest and found a warmer place beneath her chin. Can I come by tomorrow? He asked. Grace hesitated. Come for coffee. It was not forgiveness. Not yet. It was an opening. I will be there. When the call ended, Mason returned to the treatment room. Emily had finished another examination and was writing notes on a clipboard. All 5 are maintaining temperature, she said. The smallest one is stronger than it was an hour ago. Mason knelt beside Luna. She raised her head and touched her nose to his wrist, the same gesture she had offered at the shelter gate. Good news, he told her. Carla entered carrying a stack of fresh towels and a printed foster schedule. We have 3 experienced homes willing to help once the puppies are stable, she said. But I want them kept together for now. Mason looked at Luna. She will need somewhere quiet. Carla studied him. Your house is quiet. He glanced up. Too quiet. Maybe that is the problem. Emily smiled without looking away from the puppies. She already trusts you. Mason considered the small house, the empty porch, the automatic light turning on for no one. He imagined Luna standing at the doorway, uncertain whether it would remain open. Temporary foster, he said. Carla nodded as if she had expected nothing else. Temporary. By sunrise, the storm clouds had cleared. Pale light entered the treatment room and rested across the blankets. Luna slept at last. All 5 puppies gathered against her. Mason sat nearby with a paper cup of coffee, his phone on the floor beside him. A new message from Grace waited on the screen. Do not be late. He smiled. For the first time in 11 months, he had somewhere to be that was not an obligation. And for the first time since Luna arrived, the shelter door behind them no longer looked like a place she feared. It looked like the first threshold she had crossed with everyone she loved. The next morning, Mason arrived at Grace's house 5 minutes early with 2 cups of coffee and no speech prepared. Her home sat on a quiet road east of Asheville, a white porch wrapped in bare winter vines and wind chimes that moved softly beneath the eaves. Grace opened the door before he could knock. She looked older than he remembered, though not by much. Mostly tired. The kind of tired built by disappointment rather than lack of sleep. Mason held out 1 cup. No sugar. You remembered. Some things stay. She stepped aside. The doorway remained open between them for a second longer than necessary. Then Mason walked in. They sat at the kitchen table where morning light reached across the wood in pale rectangles. At first, they spoke about ordinary things. The weather. The shelter. A leaking gutter at Mason's house. Grace listened when he told her about Luna and the puppies, about the cold trail, the abandoned truck, and the way Luna would not cross the shelter threshold until every puppy went first. She sounds stubborn, Grace said. She sounds loyal. Grace looked into her coffee. Those 2 things can look the same from far away. Mason understood the sentence was not only about the dog. I thought staying distant kept me from disappointing you again. It only made the disappointment last longer. He nodded. There was no defense that would help. I'm trying to stop doing that. Grace studied him for a moment. Trying is not the same as showing up. Then let me show up. The wind chimes moved outside. Grace did not forgive him in one dramatic breath. She did something smaller. She reached for the second cup and asked what time the shelter closed. By late afternoon, they drove together to Willow Creek. Luna and the puppies had been cleared to leave the treatment room and move into temporary foster care. Mason had prepared his spare bedroom with washable blankets, a low barrier, warm bedding, and a quiet corner away from the front windows. When he opened the back of his truck, Luna stepped toward the ramp, then stopped. Her eyes moved from Mason to Grace. Grace lowered herself slowly and held out her hand. You do not know me yet, she said. That is all right. Luna approached and touched her nose to Grace's fingers. Then she looked back at the carrier holding the puppies. Mason lifted it first. Luna followed closely, matching every step. At Mason's house, the porch light came on automatically as dusk settled over the yard. He carried the puppies through the front door and placed the carrier inside the prepared room. Luna stood at the threshold, watching. It was the third doorway she had faced in 2 days. This one had no kennel sounds, no unfamiliar staff, and no cold forest behind it. Only Mason on one side and Grace on the other. Mason stepped back, giving her space. Grace opened the door wider. Luna looked at both of them, then crossed the threshold. Inside, she checked the carrier, counted each puppy with her nose, and settled beside them. Grace stood in the hallway with one hand resting on the doorframe. You really made room for all of them. Mason looked at the blankets, the bowls, and the small bodies sleeping safely together. I should have learned sooner that making room is different from losing space. Grace's expression softened. They sat on the floor beside Luna until evening. No one rushed the silence. This time, it did not feel like distance. It felt like trust, beginning carefully, one open door at a time. 6 weeks later, spring had begun to soften the Blue Ridge foothills, turning the bare trees green at their edges and warming the porch boards beneath the morning sun. Mason stood at the front door of his house with Luna beside him, watching the last foster family carry a sleepy black and tan puppy toward their car. The other 4 had already gone to carefully chosen homes, each one leaving with a blanket that smelled like Luna and a photograph of the family who had once loved her but could not bring her back. Carla had called every adopter twice. Emily had checked every medical record. Mason had asked more questions than anyone expected. Luna watched each departure quietly. She did not pull toward the driveway or search the rooms afterward. She seemed to understand that her puppies were not disappearing. They were being received. The final family waved from the road, and Mason lifted one hand in return. When the car vanished beyond the trees, Luna leaned against his leg. "Just us now," he said. She looked toward the open doorway, then stepped inside. The temporary foster papers had become adoption papers 3 days earlier. Mason had signed them at the kitchen table while Luna rested beneath his chair, her head across his boots. Carla had smiled when he tried to explain that the decision had been practical. No one believed him, least of all Grace. She arrived that afternoon carrying a pie, 2 dog toys, and the same cautious smile she had worn the first time she entered his house. Mason opened the door before she knocked. For a brief moment, brother and sister stood on opposite sides of the threshold. The old silence might once have filled the space. This time, Luna moved between them, sniffed Grace's coat, then turned and walked into the living room as if inviting both of them to follow. Grace laughed softly. "I guess that settles it." Mason stepped aside. "Come in." They sat on the porch later while Luna rested between their chairs, her black and tan coat clean and bright in the afternoon light. Wind moved through the pines. Somewhere down the road, children called to one another, and a lawn mower started with a distant cough. Grace told Mason about her work, her plans to repaint the kitchen, and the tomato plants she wanted to grow that summer. Mason listened, really listened. When she asked about the shelter, he told her he had agreed to lead a weekend program for veterans who wanted to volunteer with rescued dogs. "That sounds permanent," she said. "Maybe it is." Grace looked toward Luna. "You always hated permanent." Mason rested one hand on the dog's shoulder. "I think I confused it with being trapped." Luna lifted her head at the sound of his voice, then placed it across his knee. Grace watched them for a moment. "And now?" Mason looked through the open front door. Inside, the spare room no longer held puppy blankets and heat pads. It held a dog bed, a small wooden crate of toys, and a framed photograph of Luna with all 5 puppies beneath the shelter's warm lights. "Now it feels like staying." Grace reached across the space between their chairs and placed her hand over his. No apology followed. No promise dramatic enough to erase 11 months. Only contact. Only presence. Luna shifted until part of her body touched them both. As evening settled, the porch light came on automatically. Mason once thought it had illuminated an empty house. Now it shone over his sister's coffee cup, Luna's resting paws, and a doorway left open to the warm rooms behind them. The hardest step had never been escaping the cold. It had been trusting that safety would still be there after everyone you loved crossed the threshold. Luna had learned that first. Mason was finally learning it too.